The 1970s was an interesting time to be alive. The Vietnam War continued under U.S. President Nixon, and that led to further conflict with the invasion of Cambodia. The murder of Martin Luther King Jr. in 1968 led to riots and further racial distrust and the regression of major cities like New York and San Francisco. The Watergate scandal, which led to the arrests of many U.S. government officials and the resignation of President Nixon himself, has led to a lot of the art at the time being more cynical than usual. Cinema in the 70s generally focused on hard-boiled policemen, paranoia, and anti-heroes who had to deal with the drudge of crime, corruption, and immorality. There wasn't as much for children to look up to or to find inspirational. In other words, a lack of positive, heroic stories depicting the hero's journey. Then the late 70s happened, and more imaginative and fantastical films started to emerge, beginning with Star Wars, and then Superman, and more appeared due to the new wave of directors from the World War II or baby boomer generation. George Lucas, who created Star Wars, wanted to recapture the spirit of his childhood by recreating the fun of those early serials from the 30s and 40s. The heroic, swashbuckling type of storytelling that brought kids back to the theaters every week to find out what happens next. George would further draw from other action-packed serials and films of the 30s to develop a new film about a heroic archaeologist who was seeking a biblical artifact in a race against the villainous Third Reich. The film would develop into perhaps Steven Spielberg's greatest film ever, Raiders of the Lost Ark. Why don't we look a bit backwards and see how this film project came to be? The idea of Indiana Jones originated in the mind of George Lucas when he was researching and finding his space opera story that became Star Wars. Lucas got distracted and saw an old movie poster depicting a man jumping off a horse and landing on a truck, and thought about the science of archaeology and what if there was a character that was both an archaeology professor and a grave robber seeking out renowned artifacts. Lucas wanted to make a movie that featured the attributes of old movie serials such as Zorro's Fighting Legion and Don Winslow of the Navy, with swashbuckling and Nazis. The character materialized initially as Indiana Smith, and Lucas fleshed out the character in the main story plot of finding the Ark of the Covenant with fellow writer and director Philip Kaufman, known for his famous remake of The Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Lucas wanted Kaufman to direct, but he was busy with Body Snatchers and other projects, so Lucas went to Spielberg after Star Wars was released and pitched it to him after Spielberg said he was interested in directing a James Bond film. Spielberg suggested the name Indiana Jones instead of Smith, with Indiana being the name of Lucas's dog. As Lucas and Spielberg came up with ideas for set pieces, they hired screenwriter Lawrence Kasdan to write the screenplay linking the set pieces together, making the title character an anti-hero but likable and fallible with memorable characters and dialogue. Lucas couldn't fund it like The Empire Strikes Back, so he went to studios to sell the script, but maintained complete creative control and asked for $20 million. Most studios found this deal unacceptable. Lucas went to Paramount and worked out a deal with Michael Eisner, surrendering sequel rights and penalties for going over budget. Hence, the debut of James Bond, Clint Eastwood, and Toshiro Mifune-inspired Indiana Jones, played by Han Solo himself, Harrison Ford, makes his grave-robbing debut in the eye-melting Raiders of the Lost Ark. Raiders begins with the old classic Paramount logo card with the famous Paramount Mountain summit fading into a matching shape. We begin this movie in South America in 1936 and follow a group of men traversing the jungle, led by a man wearing a leather jacket and a fedora, making their way to an ancient temple. The man with the hat is being escorted by 3 guides. One gets scared of the temple warning with bats coming out of a gargoyle, to another one betraying the man to get the prize in the temple that fails miserably when the man in the hat brandishes a whip and disarms him. With 1 guide left, the man enters the temple and avoids booby traps, including avoiding the light, or a spare wall will spring forth and impale its victim. Next obstacle is a bottomless pit, so they use the whip to get past it. We see the prize out in the open, a golden fertility idol of the Chachapoyan temple. The floor is filled with traps, so the man has to watch his step as he approaches the pedestal. He takes out a bag of sand and attempts to switch it with the idol, but the weight doesn't suffice and the main booby trap is set, with the doors closing. The other guy lands on the other side of the bottomless pit with the whip and betrays the man with the hat by taking the idol and not giving him the whip. The man jumps, pulling himself up, and gets out before the door can seal him in. He finds the guy dead of the spear wall booby trap from earlier, but the man has bigger problems as he is being chased by a giant rolling boulder, but he manages to dive out only to be captured by the Jovitos natives. We learn that the man's name is Indiana Jones, and that the Jovitos are being controlled by Jones's rival, Dr. Rene Belloc. Jones surrenders the idol to Belloc, and when no one's looking, he flees, ensuing a chase. Jones runs across the field with the Jovitos chasing and shooting poison darts at him. He screams, and swings from a vine into the river as the pilot starts the plane. Indy manages to get aboard the plane unscathed. We learn that Jock has a big snake in the passenger seat, and Indy is not happy. We hear this iconic line, "I hate snakes, Jock! I hate them!" We learn that Indiana Jones' official profession is an archaeology professor, and that he teaches at a local college. National Museum curator Dr. Marcus Brody visits him in his classroom and tells him that 2 men from U.S. Army intelligence are there to meet him. Jones and the 2 men, along with Dr. Brody, meet in the college auditorium, with the agents knowing that Indy is an obtainer of rare antiquities. We learn from the agents that the Third Reich has been scouring the world for religious artifacts because Hitler himself is obsessed with the occult, and that there is a particular Nazi archaeological dig going on in the desert just a few miles outside of Cairo, Egypt. We learn the Nazis have discovered Tanis and are seeking the headpiece to mount the Staff of Ra needed to locate the Ark of the Covenant, believed lost thousands of years ago. The Ark of the Covenant was a chest that was built by Moses and his men at the instruction of God at Mount Sinai, according to the book of Exodus in the Old Testament. The chest is believed to contain the 2 stone tablets with the 10 Commandments, a pot of manna, you know, the stuff that falls from heaven, and Aaron's rod. Moses and the Israelites were given specific instructions from the Almighty on who can handle the Ark and how to handle it, especially during battle, where it was carried as part of the vanguard. It was generally kept in a tent known as the tabernacle. If used incorrectly or used by the enemies of the Israelites, it would bring nothing but calamity to those who were not authorized by God. The Ark disappeared several hundred years later during an invasion of Jerusalem by the Babylonians, and that destroyed the temple that Solomon built, and it was unaccounted for, believed to be destroyed or taken by the Babylonians. Whether this is all hearsay or maybe perhaps the Ark is out there waiting to be discovered. In the case of this film, however, it was the Egyptians that invaded Jerusalem in 960 BC and took the Ark to the city of Tanis, where it is resting in a secret chamber called the Well of Souls. The entire city of Tanis, shortly thereafter, was consumed by the desert itself, with a sandstorm that lasted an entire year, perhaps by the will of God. The headpiece the Nazis are seeking is a round piece with a jewel in the center that is attached to the Staff of Ra. It is set up in a map room of Tanis with the staff upright in position where the sunlight emits a beam from the jewel that will show the location of the Well of Souls. The agents ask Indy the whereabouts of Professor Abner Ravenwood, Indy's mentor and friend who is prominently mentioned in several intercepted Nazi communiques with Berlin regarding Tanis. Ravenwood has possession of the headpiece the Nazis seek and is the true expert of Tanis and the Ark. The Nazis want the Ark because it can lay waste to armies and more and perhaps keep the Reich in power for 1,000 years and more. The agents task Indy with retrieving the Ark in a race before the Nazis discover its location, and therefore Indy departs to Nepal to find Professor Ravenwood, with someone clandestinely observing him. In Nepal, we meet Marion Ravenwood running her own drinking establishment somewhere in the mountains. After a drinking game, Marion sees Indy walking back into her life and she immediately strikes him, and we learn a little about their history. Indy continually asks her where her father is, but she reveals that Professor Ravenwood has been dead for some time. He asks her if she knows where the headpiece is that Abner kept. She laughs and tells him to come back tomorrow. Shortly after Indy leaves, another group of menacing individuals enter and also ask for the headpiece. Here we meet Sturmbannführer Todt and his lackeys, who also seek the power of the Ark for the Reich. Todt threatens Marion with a hot poker, until Indy shows up and knocks it out of his hand with the whip. A gunfight ensues, with Todt taking cover and the hot poker catching something on fire, burning Marion's establishment. Indy dispatches Todt's lackeys, with Todt telling his other lackey to shoot them both. Todt attempts to grab the headpiece, severely burning his hand in the process, and he flees the burning tavern. Indy, saving Marion and retrieving the headpiece, pledges to be his goddamn partner as payment for losing her establishment. They both depart and head for Cairo, Egypt. In Cairo, Indy and Marion meet Salah, Cairo's best-known digger in Egypt, and his wife and 9 children. Indy and Salah plan to find someone that can translate the markings on the headpiece. Indy and Marion go to touring the city's markets, where they are attacked by hired swords and they split up. Marion tries to fend off the men with a frying pan but gets caught in a clothes basket, and a chase ensues with Indy trying to find her. He comes across a menacing man who appears to be very skillful with the sword, and Indy doesn't seem to stand a chance. Until Indy takes out a gun and shoots him, case closed. The Nazi agents put Marion on a truck, but Indy shoots the driver and the truck loses control and explodes. Indy is devastated and goes for a drink at an outdoor table. A few German agents escort him to Belloc, who is seated inside the restaurant. Belloc taunts Jones, telling him he is not his equal and will have to find a better adversary, while stating the importance of the Ark as a transmitter to God. Indy attempts to shoot Belloc, but Salah's kids intervene and pull Indy away from all of Belloc's hired guns, saying it will take more than children to save you next time.
Indiana Jones, it'll take more than children to save you.
Later that evening, Indy and Salah go and see an old imam who translates the headpiece on both sides. They find out that Todt had the headpiece imprinted onto his hand as he attempted to grab it while burning his hand, but only read the front side, so the Nazis got the wrong location from the mat room and are digging in the wrong place. The back side says that the staff needs to be shortened out of respect for the Hebrew God. Unfortunately, the monkey who caused all the trouble with Marion earlier ate some poisoned dates that were meant for Indy and Salah. Indy and Salah infiltrate the dig and sneak into the Tanis map room. Indy places the headpiece on the staff of Ra, shortened out of respect to the Hebrew God, and then the time comes when the sunlight creates a beam from the central gem of the piece and showcases in a divine way the location of the Ark and the Well of Souls. Indy, on his way to the correct location, notices that Marion is not dead but being held against her will at the campsite. He tells her he found the Ark and that she needs to hold on for a time being, despite her objections to being tied up and held against her will. Indy himself arrives at the spot the map room showed him, and he begins an inconspicuous dig, with others joining him in the process. It takes all day and evening is here, and then they stop when they start hitting stone. They discover the hidden door to the Well of Souls and pry it open, with multiple people struggling to lift it. It is pitch black down the well, and Salah asks Indy, "Why does the floor move?" To Indy's dismay, the well's floor is full of snakes, the ultimate bane of his existence. In the meantime, Marion, still tied up, gets untied by Belloc himself and attempts to run, but Belloc assures her there is nothing but desert in every direction, so she might as well eat something. Belloc apologizes for the Nazis and offers her a dress to change into, noting an attraction he has to Marion, perhaps wanting to steal Indy's girl as well as his artifacts. They play a drinking game and Belloc gets hammered, giving Marion a chance to flee the encampment, but Sturmbannführer Todt returns and obstructs her escape and questions her. Indy gets lowered into the well, but a slip causes him to fall right in front of a cobra. He slowly backs off and starts drenching the snakes with fuel and sets them ablaze, freeing up some space for himself as Salah and a crate are lowered down. Salah and Indy go into a chamber and open a sarcophagus containing the legendary Ark of the Covenant itself, prettier than anything imagined. They crate it up and bring it to the surface, with Salah climbing up but drops the rope. Unfortunately for Indy, the Nazis discovered the well and take possession of the Ark while throwing Marion down and sealing the two of them in. The two of them banter about Belloc giving her the dress while fending off the snakes at the same time. Indy realizes the snakes are coming out of one of the walls, so Indy climbs the giant statue with the whip and rocks it until it falls into the well, breaking it so they can escape. The other side is full of mummified corpses, overwhelming Marion because of Spielberg's cruel sense of humor. They exit the Well of Souls by removing a weak stone block, and happen to be right next to the landing pad with the Luftwaffe aircraft that will be used to fly the Ark to Berlin. Indy and Marion attempt to stop the pilot from taking off, but Indy is occupied by a large, muscular Nazi officer who continually outclasses him in fistfighting. Marion takes out the pilot with a stone and accidentally locks herself in the cockpit. With the plane moving on its own, Marion takes out any supporting troops with the plane's coaxial hitting explosive containers while the wing hits a gas truck and causes gas to leak out on the pad. Indy gets a few punches on a Nazi before being struck down one last time as the plane's propellers hit the large Nazi, killing him and decorating the plane in the process. Indy gets Marion out of the cockpit and they both flee as the plane and the landing pad explodes in a spectacular way. Belloc and the head Nazi Dietrich see this and have the Ark loaded onto a truck bound for Cairo immediately. Sallah tells Indy this, and thus begins an epic chase that has made this film a legend. Indy steals a horse and pursues the truck convoy while Sallah and Marion arrange for the transportation out of Egypt, and where to meet up when Indy acquires the Ark. Indy catches up to the truck with the Ark, guarded by several Nazi goons in the back, and jumps off the horse and grabs onto the truck, opens the passenger door and throws the officer out and starts tackling the driver for control of the truck. As they are fighting, mayhem ensues until Indy punches the driver out of the car. He dispatches the neighboring vehicles and knocks Dietrich and Belloc off the road. The Nazis in the back attempt to sidle the truck to kill Jones, but Jones knocks most of them out before one gets a shot at him and hits him in the arm. The leader, in an impressive stunt, climbs to the top of the truck and crawls to the driver's side, swinging in and hitting Indy in the arm multiple times before throwing him onto the hood of the truck. Indy, in another impressive stunt, slowly slides under the truck and uses his whip to hold onto the truck as he is being dragged on the gravel road. He manages to climb back up and dispatch the leader and throw him out onto the hood and gets run over. Reclaiming the truck, Indy catches up to Belloc and Dietrich and knocks them off the road again, giving himself time to get the truck to Cairo, hidden in the marketplace with the help of the people, effectively escaping Belloc and Dietrich. That same night, Sallah arranges for Indy and Marion and the Ark to depart via ship, the Bantu Wind, commanded by Captain Katanga. Marion, with all her abilities and expertise, helps Indy recover from his injuries from the recent truck chase. Whereas a German U-boat catches up with the ship and captures it, but Indy has evaded capture, but Marion and the Ark are taken. Indy manages to swim to the U-boat and uses his whip to hold on as it submerges. The U-boat leaves and arrives at a secret Nazi base on a secret island, where Indy dons a Nazi uniform and bazooka. As Belloc and the Nazis are marching to the site where they will open the Ark, Indy gets their attention from an elevated ridge and threatens to blow up the Ark. Belloc calls his bluff, telling us that, like him, Indy is interested in learning about what the Ark is capable of, and his curiosity will keep him from blowing it up. Belloc was right, and Indy surrenders to the Nazis. Belloc and the Nazis proceed with opening the Ark, with Indy and Marion tied to a post. Indy, from an off-screen warning by the Guru in Cairo, tells Marion not to look at the contents of the Ark or whatever comes out of it. The Ark, opened, is nothing but sand, but something sinister appears as clouds appear overhead, with a flame coming out of the Ark, and shoots a beam, zapping and frying the Nazis from the inside. Todt and Dietrich's faces and eyes melt during the process, and Belloc's head explodes. The clouds above opens up and sucks everything into the clouds, including the lid of the Ark, but only the Ark lid drops back down and perfectly closes and seals it back up. The Nazis gone, Indy and Marion survive and manage to bring the Ark back to the States, where the agents from earlier in the movie take possession and have their top men do research against Indy and Dr. Brody's objections. We find out that the Ark is in fact not being researched, but has been taken away to a giant facility stored in a crate amongst thousands of similar other crates. That, my friends, is Raiders of the Lost Ark, a non-stop action epic of a single man overcoming the Nazis and other sinister agents to the MacGuffin or prize, the Lost Ark itself. There is a lot of parallels to Star Wars, since this was conceived at the same time Lucas was writing what would be known as Star Wars as his personal tribute to the older serials of the 30s and 40s. The Nazis, Dietrich and Todt, are kind of parallel to the Empire, with Tarkin and Darth Vader racing against the heroes to obtain their respective MacGuffins that are key to the plot, but in fact are both well written with likable and believable characters in larger-than-life situations. I actually saw this one last, seeing Temple of Doom first and seeing Last Crusade in theaters, but I did see in commercials and advertisements the famous segment where Indy is being chased by the giant boulder in the temple. I saw these before I saw Star Wars, so I recognized Harrison Ford right away when Han Solo was introduced in Mos Eisley, and that sparked my interest in that franchise as a young child, even though the story mostly flew over my head. The film, in my opinion, is the best of the series, where the characters were taken seriously but still had plenty of levity, like the famous Indy sword fight that just ends up with Indy shooting the swordsman, because you obviously take a gun to a sword fight when the stakes are that high. The set pieces and stunts that were displayed in this movie are second to none, and you have to give Harrison Ford and his stuntmen a lot of credit for all the stuff they need to do to bring this film to life under the flawless direction of Mr. Spielberg. The villains Belloc, Todt, and even Dietrich were not to be taken lightly and were dangerous, with the stakes being raised higher and higher as Indy got closer to the Ark and the setbacks he had to experience. As a result of all this, the movie was a hit in the box office and further solidified Spielberg and Lucas as the kings of the blockbuster, and began a franchise that is still making films to this very day. The legacy of Indiana Jones has seeped into our pop culture and has manifested itself in equivalent stories, including the Tomb Raider game series and one of my personal favorites, the Legend of Zelda series, traversing ancient dungeons, obtaining treasure and rare antiquities while battling dangerous adversaries, a must-have for the action-adventure genre. There will be future videos discussing the later Indiana Jones films, and the current production under Disney Lucasfilm. Raiders of the Lost Ark, like Star Wars and The Empire Strikes Back before it, takes us to a world where we can escape from our own lives for a couple hours and take great investment in the characters in their worlds and how they manage to race and overcome the adversity that the antagonists provide and the race against time to secure a holy artifact. There is something in here for everyone, adults and children alike. Children see the iconic Indiana Jones and his fedora braving booby traps and fighting brawling brutes twice his size, whereas adults can enjoy the action as well as the story and the backdrop and appreciate the effort that Lucas and the writers put in to bring forth something that, like Star Wars, is enjoyed by people of all ages and generations. After seeing this film, do you wonder if the Ark of the Covenant still exists somewhere, hidden from humanity, or any other physical object that has been touched by God or some higher power that we don't understand? Perhaps one day this question will be answered, but let's work together to continue to learn and understand our history through surviving physical artifacts, and never forget the name, Indiana Jones. Next time, I will be taking a break from my standard reviews and will launch my serial horror sessions like I promised. I will be kicking this series off with discussing the first two movies in the Halloween series. Does a child have the means to carry out one of the most heinous crimes ever? Will years of rehabilitation help, or will it only postpone the mayhem? Is Halloween of 1978 truly the night he came home? Check out the Nerdporial Lifeform serial horror sessions presenting John Carpenter's Halloween and Halloween 2. I appreciate you, the viewer, and hope you will enjoy this upcoming video and future content. Take care, and like usual, please subscribe if you haven't, and like the video and share it with other fans. Can fellow Nerdporials survive the serial horror sessions? Stay tuned.